Okay, I'm going to.
Oh, Craig, you're back. You looked like a ghost when you disappeared.
Welcome back, everybody. We are now back on the generator. All right, just bear with us for a minute, guys. Let's let everybody that also went off at 2 o'clock come back in. All right, admit all. Good afternoon to everybody. Mr. Patrick O'Leary, Dave Steele, a lot of prestigious people here. Lovely to have you all on board.
You look much better as a ghost.
I love you too, Patrick.
But we love you.
Okay, just a reminder, everybody, please put your mics on mute. Okay, we are just waiting to get Mr. Laurie Merchant, one of our speakers, in. Kugendran, just to confirm that I'm back online, that you are in.
Yes, I am.
And you want to just turn your camera on just for a second, just so we can check and just test, make sure everything's working. We know you're better looking than Patrick and I both, so thank you very much. All right, guys, you can you can leave your cameras all off for now. Cooks, we'll call you back in when we get to you. We're just waiting for Laurie to merge with us. He's also just had power outages not far from us, so he's just logging back in.
Okay, cool, no problem.
Greg, I don't know if it's an issue, but on your delegates where you push participants, there's only 2 on the list there. I don't know if that's an issue for you.
No, no, not at all. It's myself and Kugendran at the moment, and then everyone else is just on the attendee list. We're just waiting for Laurie Merchant to join. He's just having a little bit of trouble because he's just had power off as well. Kugendran, while we're giving a bit of time to pass, just from your side, you're at the front line of this particular subject matter. We may as well just have a bit of a brief chat with you. In terms of your sales, in terms of products, I mean, as we have seen with the trucking industry across the board in particular, you must have seen that affect yourselves from a business perspective.
Sorry, Craig, you're talking about the increase in sales?
Increase in sales, correct.
Yes, yeah. There's a massive backlog at the moment, and I think not just with us locally, I think globally there's a massive backlog. I heard, I think in the US, there's something like, I think, a year lead time on new trailers being built. In some markets, they're not even taking any more orders yet. So yeah, there's been a massive spike, and there's a massive backlog also with the commercial vehicles worldwide. So yeah,
okay, thank you.
We're not.
Cheers, bye.
Yeah, we're not special.
Mr. Dr. Parker, I had a little glitch with my computer. Can you hear me?
Yes, Laurie, you're on board amongst the nearly 300 participants. Thank you very much. Welcome on board.
How many?
Just under 300.
I could have to send an invoice for this, you know.
Laurie, yeah. if you want, okay, so we're going to get going.
Yes.
All right, Laurie, if you can put yourself on mute for now, and you can turn your camera off if you want in the meantime. Alternatively, we're going to just get going. Cooks, same with you and everybody else. It seems to be that we've settled down after the load shedding. Right, so we're going to get going. Okay, so let me just share my screen with everybody and we can get going. Just bear with me, everybody. I have a triple screen system, so I often need to just figure out where everything is. But, no, that's not going to work. Right, we need to go stop sharing, share screen, and go into that screen. All right, can I just have confirmation from anybody that you can see the main front page screen, the anomaly that is commercial vehicle brakes?
Can see it.
Yes,
Can
thanks.
see it.
Right, lovely. Okay, welcome to absolutely everybody. We have clearly hit on a subject matter that is of key importance. We were somewhat overwhelmed. We jumped from double figures to triple figures immediately, and I think it's particularly because of the subject matter. And I would like to say because of the two key presenters that we have as well. So welcome to everybody. Just going through the normal procedures that I have to. Poppy and other factors, all necessary authority has been obtained in respect of role players, contributors, materials used and references made. For assistance, if you're stuck, please, Eloise is online with us. She is the backbone and the front line of this office and this session. The details are there, 309-5327, or you can email her at admin101@Accident Specialist. Session has been recorded. Please keep your cameras off. Please keep yourself muted. Please hold your questions and ask questions or raise hands in the question session, which will come after the presentation. This is a bi-monthly information session. It's presented by us. We are very, very proud and very thankful to SIOSH, the South African Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They are the key partners for this particular session. Welcome to all of their members, and we have a vast number of their members on board. This is a CPD accredited session, so if you attend the entire session, you can apply and get your accreditation. Special thank you to our subject matter experts, Laurie Merchant, and they are both unequivocally experts. They've worked closely with me for a very long time, and a lot of them and they are highly experienced in this field, as we'll come to them as we go along. All right, the intention of the session is to provide a brief hierarchical insight to real-world cases and the related nuances of the subject matter of the anomaly that is commercial vehicle brakes, to highlight and provide insight as to the specific subject matter from experienced coal-faced specialists. So you will see in all of our sessions that you attend, we don't ask for some political head or government head to come and talk. We ask for people that are at the coalface to come and attend and teach us and chat with us. To allow for a brief discussion and Q&A session, which we will get to, which will be the biggest part of the session. So please feel free to ask questions so that you can learn. We chose this particular subject matter because we have seen a massive spike in the number of brake related or finger pointing brake related issues. So I'm going to take you very quickly then through my starting session, and then we will get to our guests. So very first of all, I'm always very proud to put this slide up. Patrick O'Leary, who is online from Fleetwatch, drives a brilliant session, which is called Brake and Tire Watch, which has been going on for multiple years. What we have done with the permission of Patrick, as I indicated at the outset, we've shown you geographic where all those sessions are held around the country. So you can see that even as far as Windhoek, these sessions are held, and these sessions are instrumental in this particular subject matter because they cover, among other things, the huge component of actually looking at the condition of the brakes, the mechanical fitness of the vehicles. So what do those sessions tell us? And unequivocally, there has been 44 of these sessions, the latest one just been held in April. Some 758, Patrick, maybe you can correct me in the question sessions a bit later, but I think these stats are correct to date. 758 commercial vehicles have been tested. Of those, 519 of those vehicles failed. In other words, close on 70% of the vehicles failed. So let's just contextualize that very quickly. So if you are driving to work, from work, or on holiday, 7 in 10 of every commercial vehicle that drives past you is unroadworthy. That's what we're saying. Just think of that for a second. So that is more than 50% of these that fail have a serious mechanical issue. Most of them are brake related. Right. So the National Department of Transport and the RTMC, we're not going to get into details of this, but we do know that they have a bit of a problem and an issue providing us detailed stats. However, from what has been supplied by them, it does not specifically say brake issues were a factor, but it does put commercial vehicles fourth on the list in terms of the last release that was done, stand under correction, was 21-22. The last stats pointed at commercial vehicles being the fourth highest number of crash-related vehicles on our road. So it is certainly a major factor. From our own stats, and we monitor our own stats extensively, both for our cases appointed to us, as well as nationally in terms of cases that we record on some of the projects that we do. Light motor vehicles, light delivery vehicles, or as we know them, buckies, minibus taxis, truck, tractors and trailers, or commercial vehicles is the order of severity of the number of vehicles involved. We're not here getting into whether this is driver error or brakes, just simply that in relation to this subject matter, commercial vehicle brake systems are certainly up there in terms of the number of crashes involving that type of vehicle. So we're going to take you quickly through two case studies, just very briefly in a very hierarchical overview. So this particular vehicle here, and I'll just read for you verbatim. This particular case involved a crash that occurred where a bus lost control and crashed or rolled during cornering, resulting in various fatalities and various serious injuries. So you can see unequivocally this is a commercial vehicle. The crash occurred on a notorious steep downhill pass in the Free State. It is signposted as a 50 km/h section, and as you can see in the screen, there were various evidential factors that we located on the scene that allowed us to determine certain things. So in slight close-up, you can see those marks a little bit clearer. We attended at the scene and we recorded those marks. The evidential marks are taken and we do certain calculations from them. So on the screen, you can see where I'm pointing out, that is the marks, and you can see A is where the vehicle came to rest. We do certain calculations from that, evaluations from that, and you can see that we are able to determine that that vehicle was traveling between 64 to 72 kilometers per hour. And therefore, because it's a 50 km/h zone, we can see it was traveling substantially higher than the speed limit. That's a conservative calculation. In fact, the vehicle speed would have been somewhat higher than that still. So still dealing with this particular vehicle, what was of interest is beyond the scene, we now get to this issue of the anomaly that is the brakes. On this particular vehicle, even if you're not technically inclined, just to fill you in that if you look at that brake shoe, that is generally how a brake shoe on a commercial vehicle should look that has drum brakes. It's in very, very good condition. So when we looked at this, we could immediately tell that there was virtually no brakes actively making contact. So even in layman terms, you understand that on your car, your brake pads need to be touching your disc. Same thing on a commercial vehicle, the shoes need to be touching the drums. In this particular case, we could see that only about 2 to 5% of the actual, this particular shoe was touching on the drums. So we knew straight away there was some sort of problem here. This is the same vehicle. One of the other shoes. So on the right-hand side, we can see that that particular shoe is not making full contact, and we can see on the drum itself, those shiny little spots you see, it's not clean contact. In this particular shoe, there was about 10 to 20% contact. So we knew on both of these that there was an issue of the brakes not working properly on this vehicle. We could tell that from the mechanical inspection. Right, so some of the questions that raised in this case study was, why was the bus traveling at the speed that it was? Was this simply driver error? Was the bus overloaded? Was there a problem with the bus? Was there some level of combination of these issues, or were there some other factors? Right, so that's the brief synopsis of that case study, but we leave it open to your imagination therefrom that obviously you could see that very clearly there was some issue with the brakes there. Right, we'll come back to that a bit later in the discussions. On the case study 2, similarly, this particular case involved a crash that occurred in 2013, a bus lost control. and crashed, rolled during cornering, resulting in various fatalities and various serious injuries. So the crash occurred on a notorious long, steep downhill mountain pass. As you can see, 80 km/h speed limit. Likewise, there are the typical engaged lower gear warning signs, and there happens to be an arrestor bed on this particular road as well. So the scene evidence, we were able to determine very clearly where the vehicle rolled over. We were able to determine very clearly where the vehicle slid along, what it impacted with, and likewise where it came to rest. So we looked at the scene evidence, and from the scene evidence, we were able to determine certain things. We were able to determine what we call a critical curve speed. In other words, the maximum speed at which you can go around that particular corner. And from that, we were also able to determine certain other factors. For instance, conservatively, we were able to determine the bus was doing 96 km/h. So once again, above the speed limit and should never have been traveling at that speed. So once again, the question arose, why had the bus been traveling at such a speed? Was this simply driver error? Was the bus overloaded? Was there a problem with the bus? Was there some level of combination of these factors? Was there some other factor? Interestingly, and this is a by the way, this bus was completely roadworthy and licensed and certified, the exact same with the other bus as well. This particular bus is registered as a 2-axle vehicle, a 2-rear axle vehicle, yet there was 3 axles, or sorry, 2 axles in total, yet there was 3 axles. The axle that was, the extra axle that was fitted was a front axle modified to be fitted to the back of the vehicle. When we inspected this vehicle, we found certain broken off mounting brackets, broken off air hose, air supply pipes on the rear wheels, and broken leaf springs as well. So there's an example. You can see where I'm circling. There was a pipe that was broken off. We could see that there was other broken items on the vehicle. And we could see where this particular pipe had been broken off for a substantial period of time. I'm sure we'll discuss this case later, because this was a case that Laurie Merchant was also quite heavily involved in as well. So very quickly for you, and these case studies we're not going to go into in detail, just to highlight for you, for example, this is N3 eastbound Pietermaritzburg, Hilton. This was another commercial vehicle crash. This particular case, there was a finger pointing at the brakes on the system as well. For those of you that know this case, this was the horrific Hex River Pass crash we did. And this was also a brake issue. The vehicle had gone straight through the arrestor bed in the one side, out the other side, all the way down the pass, and then eventually crashed. N3 East Town Hill, again, this particular case, this was a major crash as well. Again, it was a case of brakes, not only allegations, it was a very serious brake issue on this vehicle. And for those of you that know the M13 case, what we call Sanele May, this was a major brake issue case as well. So in brief for you, here's an exact example for you of what a drum is. Obviously, we're not here to teach you to be brake experts. We're just trying to give you a little bit of insight. So as you can see, in general, besides the rust, because it's been standing for a while before it was inspected, we can see there's a relatively clean contact surface where the shoes have been making contact there. So this is the kind of example of once the vehicle is stripped and examined, we should be looking for these kinds of things. On your right-hand side, you can see the internal braking system that fits inside this drum. So this is just an example. The key issue we want to point out to you here, and this will come up again in the discussions, you cannot see this and inspect this properly unless the system is actually physically pulled apart and inspected. This is just an interesting slide for you. It's not often that you'll get to see this firsthand. And again, this is something you only see if you pull the system apart and inspect it. This is called bluing. This is very, very high heat contact. This is usually caused where I'm sure most of us have smelt it and seen it, where the brakes are overheating, the driver is overusing his brakes, or the brakes are binding for some reason. This is the kind of effect that you will see on the insides of the drum. So it's just some examples for you of many, many factors that you might come across or have to deal with in terms of braking. The final slide before we get on to our discussion. So this is in essence for you what the overall braking system on a truck looks like. So where you see my mouse moving around, this is the front of the truck. This is the front right-hand wheel. This is the front left-hand wheel. These are the two rear right wheels and the two rear left wheels. So this is basically on a board the entire system that one would need to know and need to inspect on a commercial vehicle. Obviously, you would have the entire rear section would be duplicated and connected to this if there were trailers involved as well. So understanding, knowing the components and what you need to deal with is very, very important in this. Whether you are a claims handler, an assessor, whether you are at the front line as a policeman, you should have at least some basic understanding of the extent and what is involved in one of these systems. Right, at this point, I'm going to call on our two co-presenters, Kugendran and Laurie Merchant. If I could ask you guys kindly to step in and turn your cameras on, and I will briefly introduce you. Right, Kugendran has been in this field for a very, very long time. Kugendran holds a BSc Mechanical Engineering from my hometown, UKZN Durban. He is currently the technical sales manager at Wabco, and he has 23 years experience in this particular field. He has also worked for various other companies as well. Kugendran is certainly your man to go to when it comes to the particular products on the field. Kugendran, welcome on board.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Laurie Merchant is, I'm sure a lot of people online with us will know Laurie. Laurie has been at the front line, I think possibly for before I was even born. I'll say that with respect, Laurie. Laurie is a very, very outspoken person, very passionate about his work. Laurie comes from a technical background as well. He has been head of the Society of Operational Engineers to various other levels. Laurie, you've got yourself on mute there. In all, Laurie has got 47 years experience working directly in the commercial braking system. And I can tell you from first-hand experience, Laurie owned a company that dealt with this, and Laurie is to this day the person that strips every vehicle, checks every component. Welcome on board, Laurie.
Thank you, Craig, and welcome to everybody else. Thank you.
Okay, so the intention is, as you guys will see on the slide, we've set up a couple of general questions for you guys, based on this whole issue of the anomalies of truck brakes. So when I go through these questions, we want to expand on this, and this is where we call on all the attendees to ask your questions as well. So I'm going to set the ball rolling, and I'm going to put this out there and say to you, Laurie, the National Road Traffic Act 154155 is somewhat outdated. Is it still applicable? SANS 1207, 1447, 1051 are generally the standards we abide by, guarded, and are referenced in the National Road Traffic Act. Is the Act outdated? Is it still applicable? If it's outdated, why?
It's not outdated, Craig. The requirements for the brake equipment depends on the year of first registration. Okay, so from 1986, SABS 1051 and 1207 would be applicable. Okay, up to 2004, when SANS 20013 comes into effect. So when inspecting a vehicle, the first thing you have to determine is the year of manufacture. If it's before 1986, then the National Road Traffic Act would apply, which would call for a dual brake system. From 1986, it would, you see, the regulations do not specify, for example, a load sensing valve is necessary. It actually says the wheels must not lock under any condition. So you've got to be able to look at the regulations and interpret what they actually mean. So from 1986, 1207, 1051, 2004, 2013. So you've got to look at it, and then you've got to assess whether it's roadworthy or not only in a mechanical condition, in a legal condition as well. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely spot on.
Thank you.
So let's summarize that. So for anybody that's listening here, especially those that work in the legal field and with insurance companies, the Act still remains the go-to. You need to you still need to just be aware that from 2004, the key change came in where the ABS requirements and the other peripheral requirements have come in.
Correct.
Kugendran, from your side, all the products comply with this? They're still in line with this?
Yes, very much so. Most of our products are obviously European design and manufactured, so they comply to the ECE Regulation 13, which is equivalent to our SANS 20013. So yeah, it's all compliant.
So let's just clarify that. And I always try and synopsis because sometimes these questions are raised. So someone will say, is this SABS approved brakes? So it may not carry, as we know from the old days, an SABS approved stamp. But if it carries an ECE stamp, that means it's compliance and it's a minimum requirement of what we require here in our country.
Yes, that's right.
100%. Laurie, any comments on that?
No, all I'll say is that our SABS regulations are based on EEC. All they did was change the name.
And
and everyone knows the European spec is 100%. But our vehicles are also 100%. The problem is the maintenance. But we'll get to that later, I'm sure.
100%. Right. So let's move on then. This all noted, things can and do go wrong. We find some of the common problems are, and these are obviously things that when I go out to my crash cases, we look and inspect for all these things. So we often find lots of simple little things and obviously major things as well, but even the little simple little things like Susie Airlines that are broken or cracked or damaged or kinked. Laurie, from your perspective, what are some of the common things that we find, everyday things you find when you inspect a vehicle that are wrong?
Craig, the list would be too long. Honestly, it would. It would be too long. Let's talk about the Susie hoses. Right, the new specification for the Susie hose is they must be attached to the truck tractor. They must be attached, okay. They must have non-interchangeable couplings at the end of the Susie hoses. They must have automatic shut-off valves fitted behind the couplings so the air does not leak out when they are disconnected from the trailer. Then we have the trailer. The trailer couplings, okay, you have a male coupling, the female coupling, this is all legislated, this is all legislated. This is legal requirements. The female coupling must have what we call an adapter.
Sounded gone.
Laurie Merchant. Sorry, Laurie, just take yourself off mute there. Laurie, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
There we go. Sorry, apologies, Laurie. You went on to mute for a second there. My apologies.
Yes, I was going to put it on mute to see who was making the noise. Whoever it is, just be quiet.
Okay, so
How was I? Oh yeah, we're still living in the dark ages because years ago we put the couplings on the truck tractor. We did, and the Susie hoses were attached to the trailer. Now we've reversed that now. The Susie hoses must be attached to the truck tractor with the non-interchangeable couplings on the end and automatic shut-off valves behind the couplings.
So let's just talk about that quickly for a second, Laurie. All of these things that we're saying, you said there's a massive list of them that we could go through, but all of them we can find in the Act. So somebody that is looking at this needs to know this or must go and read up on it.
Exactly. Exactly. SANS 10047. Okay. Requirements for roadworthy. It should be the testing station's Bible. It says on it's got tires, brakes, steering, everything. It actually says reject if, and then it gives you a list of what to reject on, you know, but
100%.
and it should be the Bible, but it's not. I can assure you it's not.
100%. Kugendran, just a comment from your side, and perhaps more from, and if I'm incorrect saying this, please feel free to correct me. You guys must see this in terms of the common problems that are happening on the vehicles will require those things to be replaced. You must see this in your sales. Susie pipes, other common components. What are those? Give us a heads up to the kinds of things.
Yeah, as Laurie said, it's a lack of maintenance and obviously understanding as well. And a lot of times the guys that do the maintenance mismatch products. So they would mismatch things like thread sizes, mismatch the couplings. Yeah, and the list, like he says, goes on. So you do see a lot of actually uneducated or untrained technicians working on these vehicles, and they tend to do whatever they feel. And if you look at most of the vehicles, when they leave the production line, they all conform to the acts and to the required regulation. So repairing it should be fairly simple. You replace like for like. But obviously to cut costs and to minimize, I think, the expenditure, a lot of the operators tend to take shortcuts. And yeah, that's what happens is that you end up with an unroadworthy vehicle. And then, yeah, that's when the crashes happen and the accidents and so on.
100%.
Right,
Okay, so
can I come in there? Also,
fire away, Laurie.
Also, there's a SAN specification for Susie hoses. There's a certain requirement for the nylon material, but somehow or other, grey products enter in. They do. They and so if you're going to pay 100 Rand for a Susie, or you can pay 30 Rand for a pirate thing, what do you pay? 30 Rand for the pirate thing. That's why they kink easily and things, But there's a SAN spec. They shouldn't be allowed to be sold. That's all I'll add to Ruben.
So let's just quickly, I should have done this from the outset. So, we will have a lot of people on board here that are not necessarily technically inclined. So what we are actually talking about here when we're talking about the Susie pipes is the actual airline pipe. It's the little, if you want to put it that way, curved pipe or circular sprung pipe that connects between the horse or the truck tractor and the trailer. It's the little pipes you see jangling between the two vehicles. Those are common things we see being stolen, damaged, mishandled, etc. But Laurie, you're quite correct, and I think that's a point that is well made. I think for every component, and maybe a closing comment on this question from you, Kugendran, every component itself has a standard. So the drum itself, the slack adjusters, the shoes themselves, the pipes, all the components have a standard that they need to be compliant with. Is that correct?
Yes, very much so. There's standards, a lot of them specific to each component. Yes, and they need to comply. But as Laurie was saying, you can find a lot of pirate or non-conforming product in the market, and I think that's where a lot of the problems come in, is that it's easily accessible. I mean, even some of the nylon pipes, they may be marked as compliant, but we know, from testing and from the usage, it's not compliant. And even just dimensionally, they may not be right. And you find them not working well with the fittings or mismatching with the fittings and pulling off and so on. So yes, there's a lot of non-compliance, I think, with the aftermarket product.
So let's raise that from an alternative perspective. Let's say, for instance, we're an insurer and we send Laurie out, and Laurie points out that there's an incorrect specification shoe, an incorrect specification slack adjuster, an incorrect specification Susie. To the untrained eye, nobody's going to notice that. But when Laurie points that out, that these are aftermarket products and they're not up to specification, could that mean that could be the cause of a crash? Let's put it that way. In other words, you're saying the pipe is too thin, it's the wrong internal diameter. That has an effect on the pressure on the system. Is that correct?
Yeah, very much so. I think, obviously, when we design and develop new vehicles, we test the performance of these vehicles. They need to meet a minimum requirement. And once you start, changing that, you can't guarantee the performance and even the calibration of the safety systems that you put in place, that it's going to work correctly. So, yeah, changing anything, on a vehicle, that's been homologated can affect the homologation standard and obviously the performance of the vehicle. So therefore, you know, you need to comply to what was originally fitted to ensure that, you know, your whatever safety that we put in place and the performance that we've designed this vehicle for, you know, is still met when it's on the road.
So I think a fair synopsis for the first three questions would be that there is very definitely a huge learning curve and huge requirement to sit and read and understand and know exactly what the Act says, what all the standards say, and what all the specifications should be. Would that be a fair synopsis between the two of you?
Yes, definitely, I agree with that.
100%, Craig, 100%.
All right, so let's move on then. So undercarriage damaged parts such as slack adjusters, load sensing valves and connectors can come off. They can be damaged. I mean, we do know we have a problem in South Africa where, not only in South Africa, internationally, these commercial vehicles tend to go usually somewhat off-road. I mean, we could get a stone that's knocked up and broken something off. The question to this is, if something like this happens, Laurie, and maybe I pitch this to you first of all, should that automatically mean that we now have this major catastrophic problem with our braking system?
No, it shouldn't. Not if maintenance is carried out on a regular basis. It shouldn't. I mean, the load sensing valve, okay, it can fail in a fail-safe position where it only gives a certain pressure, which is, let's say 3 bar. If it fails, it will give 3 bar on a full application, or it can fail into a fully open position, which will give full pressure through to the system. But what happens is the linkage breaks, okay, which, yes, can happen. But when you go and examine the vehicle, you can see that the rubber has perished and it's been in that condition for months and months. There's definitely a problem with a maintenance problem. I mean, also, automatic slack adjusters can also fail. They can. But if it's tested on a regular maintenance inspection, then it would be changed, you know, but that doesn't happen. What normally happens is the automatic slack adjuster goes faulty. A new one is 2,000 or 3,000 rand. So we'll put a manual one on that say it costs 500 rand, which on a 2004 upwards trailer is illegal. And then I'll tell you what happens is the truck tractor is on a maintenance contract. The truck tractor goes in to a distributor, does a very first class service. The trailer is parked off the road and isn't even looked at. And that is a fact. Thank you.
As we said at the outset, Laurie is a very outspoken and rightfully so person when it comes to the subject matter because he knows it very well. Laurie, just touching on that same subject matter again, let's just scratch a little bit deeper into this. So let's say, for instance, a load sensing valve or a slack adjuster failed. So my other question to you relating to that would be, so that doesn't mean to say we now don't have brakes. We may have reduced braking capacity or perhaps braking on one wheel is not working. That should still not, by definition, lead to what is the common thing of, well, my brakes failed.
No, yes. You know, there are so many safety features built into these vehicles now. It is impossible to have a brake failure if the rig is maintained properly. It's impossible. I mean, a lot of people are under the impression that if the ABS isn't working, the brakes don't work. The ABS only comes into effect in, say, on gravel roads, wet roads, etc. It senses when the wheel's going to lock, and then it will release the pressure and apply the pressure again. You know, you don't need ABS in dry weather. Really, you don't. You know what I mean? It's there as a safety feature, and it is critical for when it rains, etc. When I won't say coefficient of friction, when the grip is reduced between the tire and the road, like in wet conditions or an oil spill, that type of thing, then the ABS comes into effect, and it is a fantastic invention. It really is. But it doesn't affect the brake efficiency, and a lot of people are under the impression that it does.
So let's put that in layman's terms. So if I understand you correct, Laurie, what you're saying is prior to ABS, we had working, functional, good braking systems. The inclusion of ABS simply improves that system under particular circumstances. But if the ABS is not working, the brakes should still be working, and my brakes did not fail.
100%. And also, normal braking. I mean, emergency braking, it's 6.5 bar upwards. So some of these vehicles work on 10, 11 bar now. But say 6.5 bar normal for emergency braking. Normal braking, you're using between 1 and 2 bar air pressure. You know, hardly ever, only in an emergency are you going to put full pressure through to the system. You know, so yes, carry on.
No, that's a good point. So it's perhaps something we should have necessarily started off with. So once again, we have certain people on the group that may not be technically inclined. So let's just touch on that very briefly. So in your day-to-day car, you push on the brake pedal. It's compressing a hydraulic fluid. In a commercial truck, to synopsis it very simply, your system is working on air. It's a very different system. Just so that people are aware of it, and this is the pressure that Laurie is referring to, is the air pressure that is in the system on these trucks. Correct? Kugendran, any comments on that?
Yeah, just to add to what Laurie is saying, I think you cannot have one particular catastrophic brake failure or brake component failure and have the entire rig non-operational. The brake systems are designed such that you have system independency between the multiple circuits that are built in, and you should have sufficient warning before you go into a situation where you have minimal brakes or not enough brakes, because that's tested when they do the homologation, so that you have at least secondary braking before you get to a complete system failure. And when the system fails, or the brake system fails, it fails to a brake on and not actually no brakes. So you need to have multiple component failures for you to have a complete brake failure in a combination or even on a vehicle. So yeah, it's almost impossible to just have one component fail and not have any brakes. Like he says, it's probably maintenance and a sequence of non-maintenance for you to get to a point where there's no brakes.
So let's just put that in layman's terms. So in essence, what you're telling me is that the system on the horse and the system on the trailer and the let's call it the park brake or the foot brake, which are different systems, they all work together but independently. So if one fails, it doesn't mean that they automatically all stop working.
100%, that's right.
Laurie, this is something that you have raised with me on many occasions, on many cases. You want to just touch on that and elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, let me just explain to everybody. The front and rear brakes on the truck tractor are completely independent of each other. If the front brake circuit fails, the rear brake circuit will still operate. On a truck tractor, they both signal the trailer brakes. So if you have a failure on the front axle, you will have the rear axle and trailer brakes, and vice versa. And if by some miracle that the foot brake was to fall off the vehicle and you had no foot brake valve and you applied the park brake, it would also signal the trailer brakes. So if everybody thinks about that, this is my favorite, it is impossible to have a total brake failure on a truck tractor trailer combination. It is impossible if, and another one of my favorite, if it maintains correctly. It's impossible.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, I think that's a great synopsis. You make it sound pretty simple, and the system in itself I understand and appreciate, but I'm always trying to think of our attendees here. We can assure you that the systems are simple. And once you get to know them, you would understand that they are quite simple. And this is what Kugendran and Laurie are saying, that they are simple. And because they are simple, that is what creates that incredible reliability on them. Right, let's move on then. Okay, so can a commercial vehicle brakes realistically be inspected properly post-crash? without air supply and without removing the wheels. I asked this question because this is a subject matter that's somewhat contentious and is quite telling in terms of some of the reports, Laurie, that you and I and Kugendran, I'm assuming you may see, where there's these opinions expressed on things and we see no one's taken the wheels off, no one's put air in the system, no one's measured anything. Laurie, starting off with you, your comment on that?
Okay. Now let me think about this. Because it depends whether it's going for a test or whether it's being examined if it's had an accident. Because if it has had an accident, the most critical part is the distance or the adjustment between the brake lining and the brake drum. That is the critical part, because if the brake lining doesn't touch the drum, the vehicle doesn't stop. That is critical. Lots of people dash out there, or they say to wherever the vehicle's parked, take the brake drums off and let me inspect it. Wrong. The most critical part is the lining touching the brake drum? And if it is, the stroke of the brake chamber. Because if the brake chamber is excessive, it can be in contact with the brake drum, but it is not. It's no force being applied between the lining and the drum. That is, Craig, that is the most critical part. So to get back to your question, if it's going for a COR, then it should not be necessary to remove the drums to see if the brake linings are fine or not. Because one, the requirement says you must have an inspection hole so you can inspect the linings through the inspection hole to see how thick they are. Secondly, if it has got disc brakes, the requirement is that it would have a warning device to tell the driver when they are below or they're getting near to being worn out. So, so it is covered in the Act. You either got an inspection hole or there is a warning device on disc brakes to tell you how the wear's going. Also, Kugendran will know this on the discs. Several of them have got an indicator on how thick the lining is, But let me tell you this. It's also in the roadworthy test. It says reject if this vehicle doesn't comply to SANS 1207 or 20013. And now for you to test that vehicle, and I was involved in this, the test stations should be putting their test gauges and testing the air brake system. They don't do that anymore. And I was involved in teaching the private test stations and the RTI on how to go about testing to see if it complies to 2013 or 1207. You have to build the air pressure up. Okay. Exhaust the air pressure from one circuit. Does the rear circuit work? Is the trailer being supplied? Vice versa. Same with the handbrake. All those tests, but now that test is going to take 3/4 of an hour on its own, regardless of inspecting the rest of the vehicle. Now, how many test stations, if they're listening out there, how many test stations are carrying out that test now? And I did that in probably when it came into effect, which was 86 or something. I went to all the test stations and showed them how to test for that. So no, Craig, really, it shouldn't be, but it is. I hear what you're saying, because the standard of our test stations, and someone's going to shoot me after this, is abominable. It is absolutely abominable. And I'll say another thing, and this is one line. Fleet Watch are doing a fantastic job. They are doing a fantastic job of going to all the test stations with their experts and teaching the road traffic inspectorate how to look at vehicles. What is wrong with that scenario? Shouldn't the road traffic inspectorate teaching everybody else?
Quite correct.
Really? I mean, I just,
Laurie, thank you for your...
I'm pleased I've got two smiles on faces here, because It's ludicrous. It is absolutely, I'm sorry, but you know me, I'm passionate about this. It's ludicrous that Patrick Leary, and 100%, I really, I'm 100%, but there's something wrong with that scenario. Why do we train road traffic inspectors? Why? You know,
Laurie, let's.
yes, carry on.
We love your passion. It's infectious. Laurie, just a quick one. So in the cases where things do need to be inspected properly, it's a hell of a task to pick the vehicle up, remove all the wheels, remove the drum. It's not easy. It's not a 5-minute task. Taking the drums off, measuring them, measuring the thickness, where that needs to be done, and it should be done properly post a crash where it needs to be done. I mean, I've worked with you on cases where we've literally taken the foot pedal systems off and gone and taken them to a lab and tested them. So it can be quite a complex case.
Yes, Greg, because you know that in most cases that the truck tractor is in such a condition that is impossible. You cannot test the brakes as such. Sometimes we can put air pressure into it, lots of times we can't. So we take components off and we test them if there's a doubt. You know, we do.
Lovely. Thank you for that, Laurie. Okay, moving on. To both of you, there's this term that is often bantered about when you work in this field of predominance. It seems to be something that is quite a important term here, especially in South Africa. Laurie, I'm going to synopsis this, and Kugs, if you guys can both chirp in on this. It seems to be that this is quite a big issue in South Africa, and I'm going to put this in layman's terms because we have these beautiful, fancy new horses, and then we have much older systems on our trailers. And this predominance, if you guys want to elaborate on this, has to do with, essentially in layman's terms, the cooperation or the effective working between the horse and trailer. Kugs, if you want to start off on this one.
Okay, yeah. So the predominance feature that you have on a trailer control valve, I think there's a lot of misconceptions in the industry that it actually speeds up the brake signal. That's not actually the case, and it's not the purpose of the predominance value or settings. The predominance is basically a setting that you use to overcome friction. So your frictional losses between your truck and trailer, you use this function to overcome that phenomenon. And obviously, because of the amount of valves and the amount of fittings you have there, and the length that the signal has to travel, you won't have the full brake demand signal getting to the last axle. So you use this setting to actually tune out that problem, and then you obviously try to create compatibility via tuning this setting. Now, what we find is with the new brake systems being supplied on the newer trucks, being EBS, they don't actually tune in a predominant setting. The reason being is that in majority of the markets where these trucks are being used, they also have EBS trailers being towed behind them. Now, being electronic, the signal is obviously the priority signal is your electronic signal, and there's almost no there is no losses in your signal because it's digital. So therefore, you don't really need to tune that in. However, in our market, majority of our trailers are still on ABS. So if you don't have a properly tuned predominant setting, you have a situation where your truck does a bit more braking than your trailer, and then you can end up in a situation where there's incompatibility, and that may lead to accidents. So that's my opinion on this topic. Well, not opinion; it's actually the facts of the predominance. But yeah, that's what it is.
I'll try and put that in layman's terms when you finish. But Laurie, from your side, this is something you've mentioned with me a couple of times. Your comments?
Right, from the coalface. Okay. Okay. We're right. We've got EBS systems now, which are really absolutely fantastic. But
sorry, guys. So this is electronic braking system.
It's electronic controlled.
Correct.
Okay, so it's still, if it fails safe, it goes back to a normal air pressure. Okay, but anyway, what do I want to get onto this? Compatibility between truck, tractor, and trailer. We have truck tractors. Several of them now have disc brakes. Okay. Threshold pressure, not predominant, threshold pressure is the pressure required to put the friction material into contact either with the brake drum or the brake disc. On new vehicles, that threshold pressure is 0.2 bar. All right. On an old trailer that has drum brakes, and very often now on the BPW axles, there's not just pull-off springs fitted onto the brake shoes. There's this spring that is attached to the slack adjuster to also return that. So on some of those trailers, you can have 1 bar pressure, threshold pressure. Okay.
So I just want to stop you for a second there. So to just to put that in simple layman's terms, that's like saying you can push gently on something or you need to push really hard on something.
Exactly. Now, the foot brake valve in the truck tractor is responsible for applying the brakes on the truck tractor and the trailer. Okay, so now over 0.2 bar, the disc brakes are braking the truck tractor. Nothing's happening on the trailer. You need 1 bar just to overcome the threshold pressure. There's no braking. That's just to overcome the pull-off springs and these springs that they fit on these slack adjusters. So, and this is an actual case. One vehicle, we had to put the predominance puts more pressure through to the trailer. So you can put 2 bar into the truck tractor and you can put half a bar. Normally it's 0.4 or 0.5 predominance through to the trailer. You can actually change that predominance, and I have, to put 1 bar predominance through to the trailer to try and get compatibility. Otherwise, the truck tractor brakes are wearing out and the trailer brakes will last forever. And the problem is the trailer now is pushing the truck tractor, which is dangerous. So compatibility in this, and I've got a case that I'm going to tomorrow. The compatibility is a big problem in this country because we've got 20-year-old trailers. I mean, haven't we? We've got 10 years old. You know, even if it's got ABS and EBS, all the time we've got drum brakes with pull-off springs and these huge springs pulling the slack adjuster, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem. I mean, the Wabco and the Connaught equipment are really 100%. We couldn't wish for any better equipment. But they set, and depends what valve, they set the predominance that we say 0.4. You know what I mean? Not 1 bar, because they don't know what that truck tractor is going to be pulling. And that is a big problem, Craig. Compatibility is a big problem. And I come across that so many times. Normally I do accidents, but now and again, I will get a manufacturer phone me and say, listen, we've got a problem here. The truck tractor brakes, disc brakes are wearing out and the trailer's not. And I can know what that is. And another thing is, I now can't go and change that predominance because the manufacturer are very reluctant to give you the software to put on your laptop because you have to change it now electronically. You know, we end up there, me, the manufacturer, and the guy whose brake system it is, changing it on his computer. But it's a big problem. Compatibility, big problem in this country.
So let's put that in a very brief synopsis. So what we have is we have fancy systems and less fancy systems. And the problem is we need to be aware of the fact that there's an incompatibility between them, or perhaps incompatibility is not correct term, that there are differences between them that need to be accounted for. Would that be fair?
Correct.
Right. Let's move on, gents. Thank you very much. So we have had many cases, Sanele May being one of them, where we found that the term "my mechanic maintains everything," only to find the mechanic is not a mechanic, is not qualified, and is not experienced. Laurie and Kugendran, you've both already alluded to this. This seems to be a very big problem that's going on. I mean, I can tell you firsthand, in some of our audits we do at the fleets and some of our crash cases we do, I have literally had cases where the owner has said to me, but mechanic's done everything, and then we go and question the mechanic. He's not qualified, he's actually not experienced, and he's actually, in one of my cases he just said to me, oh, I changed the booster like for like. And when we asked him, did you go and look at the data plate to see what should have been fitted? He was not even aware of what a data plate is on the vehicle. And for our listeners attending, a data plate, every vehicle has a plate on the vehicle which tells you what the specifications are for that vehicle. Coogs, some comments from your side on this issue of mechanics not being mechanics and owners relying on them?
Yeah, that's very much the case. I think a lot of them are fitters and not actually mechanics, and they haven't been trained. And also, I think a lot of the owners are reluctant to send them on training because once they get trained up, they disappear, and yeah, they're left without an employee. So a lot of the guys yeah, that we see, you know, in the industry are basically fitters. You know, they can try to take out parts and just replace them. But understanding what they're doing while they removing these parts is very difficult. And yeah, I think, you know, even if I look at some of the industry training courses, it's not very complete. You know, you find it's more they introduce them basically to the systems, but you know, it's not focused a whole lot on the maintenance, particularly on the air brake side. And to me, you know, the braking side is always the priority on any vehicle. You know, they spend a lot of time on other aspects like the electronics and the electrical, the engine and the gearbox and diff, but the component for the air brake system is very very little focus is given to that. So you know, I think a lot of focus needs to be placed on definitely the training. So yeah, that's definitely the case that we see out there.
Thanks, Coogs. Laurie, your side in brief?
No, 100%. I mean, Webco and Knorr offer training courses. So there's no, the only problem there is Webco and Knorr do air brake training. They do a 100% job on the air brake training, but they don't cover the friction side, slack adjusters, brake shoes, that type of thing. So, and I don't know of anyone that actually does, to be honest. So there's definitely a gap in the market. You know, I mean, the brake system comprises of an air system and a foundation brake, which is brake shoes, etc., etc. Another thing, Craig, just what I thought of that. People take the drums off, they machine the drum. They machine it out, say 2mm, and then they fit a standard brake lining, which is a no. But no one trains people for that. You know what I mean? They don't. If you machine the drum out 2mm, you've got to fit a lining that's 1mm thicker to take up the 2mm that you've machined out the drum. But I don't know. Hey, Cooks, do you know anyone who does that? I don't know anyone who does that training, to be honest.
Yeah, you actually need to really.
Perhaps there's a gap in the market and I should open a training school.
Well, gents, let's just move on quickly then. So, but in relation to that, so my question to you then, and this is key because we have a lot of insurance people on board here in this session. So the question then is going to be, well, so the vehicle's not maintained properly. And we know that there's Regulation 49 in the Act, which basically comes back and points a finger at the owner, you know, the lawful representative of the company or the vehicle. So should this perhaps be written in law that anybody that maintains a vehicle must have some sort of, let's say, whatever it may be, SACWA-CETA accredited training level? Should that not be written in law specifically?
Yeah, definitely, I would think so. I mean, you know, if you look at if you look at the right to repair and you know those sort of campaigns, you know, I think they have a lot of minimum requirements and so on, but none of them is related to the brakes. You know, I don't think anybody has given, and I don't think there is actually an accredited course in the country. So maybe there is a gap there to actually have an accredited course that covers, like Laurie says, the control system and the foundation brake that you know that can train or can prepare the workshops for these this sort of maintenance regimes.
Well, there we go. We to some of our guests online, if you run a training school, there's an option for you. Laurie, closing comments on this issue of mandatory laws, requirements of a mechanic and the owners?
It's definitely 100%, Craig. Let me just show you how it works in Europe. In Europe, you want to run a fleet of vehicles. Say you want 10 vehicles. You get an operator's license for 10 vehicles. The Department of Transport asks you who's going to maintain your vehicles. You say, I'm going to contract out the maintenance to a distributor. Fine, not a problem. But you're still responsible for keeping the records. You say, I'm going to maintain them myself. They say to you, okay, we'll be round next week to inspect your premises, the equipment, and your staff. You know, and if you haven't got the staff and the equipment and the premises, you don't get an operator's license. And the responsible person who, never mind the mechanic, the responsible person, if you have an accident and you are found to be negligent, can either be fined or goes to jail. That's what we need. We've got operators licenses. If you know, I've been involved with it, you know, forever. I've only ever had one case where the owner has actually been prosecuted. It's always the driver.
Yeah.
Look at Fields Hill. The driver goes to jail. The owner gets a 40,000 rand fine.
Yeah, look, I don't want to talk out of turn in terms of talking legal comments, but look, the law in South Africa is not ignorant. They are certainly going to say that, you know, if a vehicle can be shown to be grossly negligently not maintained, there's been a massive ongoing problem. The law is going to point a finger at the owner and say, for absolute sure, you can't just turn a blind eye and expect that some untrained person is expected to maintain a standard. So, you know, when it comes to legal, I still have faith in our legal system that they're going to say, well, there is still an inherent onus on you to make sure that the mechanic, if you want to put it that way, is doing a proper job. Nonetheless, let's leave that there. Last two questions, guys. So we see these engaged low gear signs, which seem to mean nothing nowadays. Particularly as we all know, these are on downhill, and they tell us that the driver is supposed to engage lower gears. So there's two questions I want to pose to both of you now. We know this, but I just want you guys to elaborate on this. In essence, a truck being driven properly down a steep hill, let's use, for instance, Town Hill. If you are in the correct gear, all things given, you should be able to technically take your hands off the steering and brakes and maintain 40 kilometers an hour the whole way down that hill, using, so to say, the strength of the vehicle. And therefore you should not be reliant on the brakes. So these signs are very, very important, and they're something that should be looked at and are there for a reason. Cooks, comment from you first of all on this issue?
Yeah, definitely. I think you know, your brakes are just there to fill in the gaps between your drivetrain and you know, the braking that you actually need to develop. So you're not meant to rely on them. I don't think they are meant or designed to absorb that amount of heat. The tests when you do the hot test on the track, you know, it doesn't go on for the time that some of these passes, you know, you need to go, well, it takes you to get down. So you definitely don't or shouldn't be reliant on them, and use your drivetrain to actually maintain the vehicle speed. And again, just fill in the gaps using the brake pedal.
Laurie, from your side?
Yes, 100%. But you're right. I mean, these modern vehicles have got in-tarders and exhaust brakes and engine brakes, etc., etc. You know, and the problem is that in the old days there was this saying: same gear up, same gear down, wasn't it? That was old days. Now we've got in-tarders and all sorts of retardation, but it's abused. It is abused. You know, you shouldn't have to put your foot on the foot brake coming down a hill. You shouldn't. As long as you're in the right gear, so which goes with that retarder or in-tarder, whatever it is, 100% right. You shouldn't be using the foundation brakes to come down a long slope.
Yeah, I don't want to mention any names out of turn, but I can tell you now, and I know I've seen it. I've been on one or two of these driver training sessions with some so-called truck drivers that I mean, it just blows my mind that they're truck drivers, and then you go on, you know, with one or two really reputable proper truck drivers, and that alone you see straight away when they're teaching you to use the systems and not the brakes. Let's move on from that, guys. Last question, and then we're going to just open the floor for 5 minutes that we've got left. Should all commercial drivers be compelled to attend at least a basic commercial braking training course, such as that offered by, as we've mentioned, Webco or others? In other words, what we're saying is currently you can go and do a driver's license and nobody actually teaches you absolutely anything about the commercial driving braking system. Should that not be mandated in part of the driver training?
Cooks?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think if you've seen how the process of actually getting a heavy duty license at the moment, it's very limited. You can take a very simple truck or a very simple trailer, and you can get your code 14, and then you get this driver that now needs to jump into a very fancy truck with all these new fancy systems, and he's probably out of his depth. I mean, even the retarders and intarders, as Laura was saying, you have these new systems, but knowing how to use it and knowing what to do, when you have failures or when you're in a situation, also identifying when there's a problem, it's not taught. I mean, if you ask a driver whether he knows what the test feature is on the park brake, most of them don't know. They don't even know it exists. And I don't think it's covered in the licensing process, but I think it definitely needs to be done, because I think the more they understand, the more they'll be in a position to drive the vehicle properly.
Well, I can tell you, Laurie, before I give you the closing comments on the subject matter, I can tell you, I think most of you know, very recently I had the opportunity to get in one of these new fancy Mercedes-Benz, and I can tell you I found it quite daunting. Instead of normally just worrying about the clutch and accelerator and the gear and my speed, I now had all of this telemetry to look at and countless systems to set. It certainly changes the field. Laurie, closing comment from you?
Yeah, I 100%. Driver training, I wouldn't necessarily say they have to go on an air brake course, but 100% the drivers should be trained. I mean, in Europe again, the driver has a checklist. Every vehicle, before he drives that, he goes round and he checks, not tires, lights, everything. But we've got to train it. I mean, the simple check is to build the air pressure up, put your foot on the foot brake, and just check how much the air pressure gauges drop. Because if they drop, say, 2 bar, you know the brakes are out of adjustment. Things like that, yes, they should be trained. They should be trained. Not just on air brakes, driver training. You can't take him out of an international and put him into a new DAF or a Mercedes or whatever. Not without training him, you can't, Craig. But we don't do it,
Yeah.
Anyway, don't get me going again.
Look, in closing, thank you guys. It's a huge subject matter. I mean, we could literally go on, for a couple of days on this, Cooks, with your in-depth knowledge of the products and in the field. And Laurie, all due respect to you, your exceptional knowledge and passion is unbelievable. Guys, if to everyone online, questions, please feel free to ask questions. It's open forum. There's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know, ask. That's how we learn. We're very proud when we do the sessions with Patrick O'Leary and the Brake and Tire Watch. We tell the officers there, ask every silly question. And I make a point of asking every silly question that doesn't get asked, so that we learn and we know. We've got 2 or 3 minutes and then we're going to close up. So if there's any questions, fire away, turn your mic on, fire away, or post it in the comment sections, or raise your hand. Patrick, I'll maybe let you open the floor. I know you're online. I'm sure you must be proud to hear quite a bit of commentary about your Brake and Tire Watch session.
Yeah, Craig, very proud. And it's you never cease to learn something every single day. And I just my comments on making it law and all that. I think Section 49 there. It's the duties of an operator. I stood in a conference once and I asked, it was a room filled with really prominent operators. I said, who knows Section 49? Not one hand went up. I said, right, so you prominent operators don't know what your duties are. And that, if that could be followed by Section 50, where there's constant sort of ignorance of what we're talking about here, and people are dying because of that ignorance, and not ignorance, they just ignore maintenance. Section 50 is where the operator's license is cancelled. That gives the MEC the right, but that is not applied. That is not applied at all. In terms of driving training, we used to have a driver training culture in this country. That's gone. That's gone. It used to be Lapid's flare driver training. A lot of the OEMs are doing driver training, but that's on their own vehicles. There's so much there in terms of the cops, huge efforts in terms of training cops. And yes, we are proud. And Craig, you've been on it, Cooks, you've been on it. And Craig is, by the way, for those listening, a very vital part of it, that thing. You know, you say to the traffic officers, they really need training. Laurie, you're right. Why are we doing it? Because they don't get that training on trucks. And you say, okay, go behind, let's test the brakes. And they say, put your brake, your foot on the brake pedal, and the lights come on, the brake lights come on. So they say, right, your brakes are working, off you go. But of course, as you've heard, brakes work on air here. It doesn't mean anything. You know, there's so much here. We've got huge challenges. We try to address them. And I just encourage everybody here to do within your sphere of influence, to do it like Laurie does, like Keegan does, like Craig does, to try and improve, because the issues are really, really big, and they've been spelt out here. And we could go in, as Craig said, you could go in for hours on this thing. In fact, I put a thing, need to extend meeting, not just came in. But Laurie, there's things like what you mentioned. I've been to dealers where you go in, they send their tractors in for a service. I have a look at the trailers that are left outside the dealer, and they're totally unroadworthy. The service tractor comes out, picks up an unroadworthy trailer, and off they go again. There's so much education needed, but also, you know, people have to care before they can get educated. A lot of operators that don't actually care. They just let their trucks run. That one in Durban, the Fields Hill, there was one this morning I got a notice on. You want to see the condition of that thing. And the one that hit, it just goes on and on, very frustrating. But you're hitting so many nails on the head here. But there's a lot of unawareness out there. I think I'll just end off with saying, operators, please, you and insurance companies, start insisting on things like application of Section 49, which is basically keep your vehicle roadworthy and keep your driver fit to drive. That's it. You know, not to run the comrades, but fit to drive, qualified. Yeah, that Section 49 needs to be really highlighted, because it puts the onus and the accountability. That's why, Craig, as you know, we don't say accident anymore, we say crash. The accountability, it puts it on the operator, which in the past it has not been. There's a driver who was arrested yesterday morning, and of course even the community is going against that, saying, what about the operator? Because that truck as well is totally unroadworthy. Section 49, guys, and then the technical side, of course, you've got to get hold of people like Webco. You've got to get hold of people like Laurie. And yeah, they do offer courses, and Craig, an amazing accident investigator. I must stop. There's just so much. And I think it's been a wonderful session, this, and very educational. I've learned so much.
Thank you, Pat. Andres, I see your comments there. One of the comments there, what would be done when consumers don't follow service intervals as they're supposed to? Well, you know, straight away, Laurie, Cooks, I'm going to speak on your behalf, just to synopsis that very quickly. It creates a problem. You're going to lose your warranty. You know, we understand it creates a problem. You know, is there a way, Henry Pretoria says, is there a way to determine if a person gradually started braking or engaging harsh braking after an accident? Henry, I can tell you now, there is generally on the systems on the vehicle, certain of them actually have systems that we can check and we can get now, especially on the modern vehicles, telemetry. Sometimes on the tracking systems themselves, aftermarket tracking systems tell us, and also sometimes the physical evidence on the scene will tell us as well. So there are certain ways, but certainly not always. Andres Boats again also asked, but if the driver is towing, if the driver tows the brakes, would that not release the air, which would be required to give the necessary pressure drop or slow the vehicle? It would then make the ABS void. Any one of the two of you guys? I understand what he's saying. So you gradually releasing all the pressure out the system.
If he's dropping this, if he's applying the brake and he's dropping the system, dropping the air pressure, obviously the braking efficiency is going to be reduced. Nothing to do with ABS. ABS doesn't come into it. Only when it's the coefficient of friction between the tyre and the road, that's what's affected.
Will the system still work, Pat? Laurie, will the system still work?
Yes, but as it's depleting the air pressure, the brake efficiency will decrease. Because say you need 6.5 bar in an emergency brake. Okay, one, if the brakes are out of adjustment, okay, the volume of air is increased. If the volume of air is increased, the pressure drops greater. And the greater the pressure drops down, the less braking efficiency is going to have. because the less force you're applying between the brake line and the brake drum. So you'll
Right.
follow that. I mean, I know, Cook, you want to jump in there, because I know it's complicated, but it isn't.
Okay,
What I'm
so-
going to do, guys, I'm going to cut you off there and be a bit rude. I apologize for that. In essence, Laurie, if I understand you correctly, to synopsis that very easy. It will have a system. It will drop the air pressure, but you should never reach a point where there's no air in the system and there's no braking. Can we keep it as simple as that?
Okay. Now, you could. Look.
You've got 30 seconds. You've got 30 seconds.
No, we can carry on here. Don't worry. If the brakes, look, it's all down to how the brake adjustment is. If the travel in the brake chamber is excessive, it will drop the air pressure greater. Okay, there'll be a greater drop in pressure. Okay, you can deplete the service brake now, and there's no more automatic application of the spring brakes. Okay, pre 86 or 80, if you depleted the air pressure and it had spring brakes on the rear axle, the spring brakes would apply automatically. That does not happen anymore. Doesn't happen anymore. So I hope everyone understands that. So if you deplete the service brake sufficiently that you run out, if you don't apply the park brake, well, goodbye, good night, Gracie, I'll say.
Gentlemen, I'm going to say thank you very much, Kugendran. Huge thank you for being on board.
Craig, could I just make one quick thing?
Before you do, Patrick,
Yeah.
to those that are online, if you need to go off, thank you very much. All of us will be here chatting, those that want to stay on and chat some more. I will keep the recording running and I will share it with everybody. Thank you all for attending. It's a huge subject matter. There are a couple of slides which I'll pop through later on, but everybody in attendance will get a copy. Bless you all. Be safe. Please look out for everybody. Patrick, fire away.
Craig, just it might sound to those that don't know that it might sound a bit unrealistic to go down a hill and not use the brakes, as the discussion was just before. Just to say, I was very privileged to be invited many years ago, and we drove down Mount Etna, which I wouldn't suggest you do it today because it started erupting yesterday. But we drove down Mount Etna, and I had a professional driver with me, and I said, okay, I don't want you to touch that brake pedal all the way down from the top to the bottom. The only time he touched it, using the retarder, all the way down, the only time he touched the pedal was about a foot as we parked, so he wouldn't touch the curb. It can be done, but you need training. The modern vehicles with the retarders, the intarders, in your brakes, all that, you can go down a hill without touching those brakes. And then when you do touch them in an emergency, they're fully functional. That's what the founder, and that's what came out. It's totally possible. That's how it should be done, but you need training.
Dave Scott, are you online? I want to bring you in here. We haven't heard anything from you. Laurie, you.
There I am. Hello, Craig.
Yes, Dave. I say that because you are literally the stalwart amongst us. I think, except for our German counterpart that has passed on, I think you are by far the longest standing person, and we owe you a debt of respect of comment.
Well, it's very kind of you. I think that first of all, there's lack of fear of the law. So anything goes. Yeah. Section 49, let's get the owners responsible. But I'd like to go back to the fact that there are certain areas in the country which you can expect a problem. And that should be Townhill, Key Ridge, Van Rhenens, those places. If you concentrate on those and get people to fear the law on those areas, I'm sure we can actually get an improvement. And also night driving. There are no cops on the road at night. That's it.
Big
so
problem.
Guys, yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Let's get some respect for the law. The law is there. We don't have to market it. It's just a lack of respect for the law.
Thank you, Dave. Last comment from my side in closing. So as you can see on the slide in front of you, for everyone in attendance, we have given you an abundance of reading material. So if you have any interest in the subject matter, you can read through those. Our next session will be on tyres, and we will have 2 top-class experts on tyres talking with us on all issues of tyres. Questions and comments you can send to Eloise, our lovely boss, and the previous sessions are recorded like this one and will be sent to you. Thank you for everyone in attendance. I will remain online. Cooks, Laurie Merchant, thank you. Bless you guys. A closing comment from either of you, 1 line. Cooks, fire away.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And yeah, if there's any follow-up questions that the participants have, they're more than welcome to contact me directly or even through you. And yeah, we can answer them as best as we can.
You're a legend, Cooks. Keep well. Thank you, Laurie. Closing comments from you.
I agree 100% with Patrick. I mean, we've got all the regulations we have for owners and everybody. There's just no law enforcement. There's no law enforcement. There isn't. You know what I mean? I mean, this is a pet of mine. I mean, the vehicle isn't roadworthy, so there's no brakes on the vehicle. But the ombudsman, his opinion is, was it directly responsible for the accident? No, then pay out the claim. To me, you're encouraging people not to maintain their vehicles.
Yeah,
really.
I have to admit I agree with you on that.
Yes, that's 100%. If it's not roadworthy, it's not roadworthy. They shouldn't pay the claim. It's the only deterrent we've got at the moment, isn't it? It is. Like Patrick says, what happened with 49 and 50? Now the owners, man, take their operator's license away. You know? And Patrick is almost as passionate as I am. Hey, Patrick.
Larry, you're a legend, my man. I could never get your passion.
I call on you and Cooks to pass so much of that wealth of knowledge on to everyone. I know you guys are always happy too, but we are certainly at a loss for a lot of our young up and coming to have that knowledge and that experience. So I call on you guys, please, in every little way that you can, to pass that knowledge on, exactly as we are doing with these sessions. Yeah, the little bit of knowledge that we can help and pass on, it's our contribution back to society, especially in this country where we have such shocking stats on the road. Gentlemen, thank you. I think it's time that we all go and have a beer, a cup of coffee, tea, or go for a run, whatever it may be. Thank you, everybody in attendance.
Craig,
yes, Patrick.
Sorry, I have to make one comment. Sorry, because everyone.
Yeah, this Irishman's got to make the last comment.
I think the trucking industry. I was at a session the other day on electric vehicles and all that, and I said, guys, you're on your own. The Department of Transport does not focus on freight transport. Never has. Even the previous pre-1994 was all about rail. And we really need to set high standards in the industry itself. And someone said, why do you think it doesn't work? And I have the evidence, a lot of evidence where the Department of Transport doesn't. And I said, it's because it works. You know, the road transport industry works. There's massive problems at the moment with crashes because we're now carrying 87% of the goods of the country. 87% because of rail failing. There's a lot of people who see big truck, big money, and they get in with no knowledge. So that's where a lot of these accidents are coming about, especially on the side tippers. But I think the industry itself has to really go all out to attain best practice on its own. I don't think worry about the law. I don't, new regulations. It's there, as Laurie said. But I do think because it works, and I'll end with this. During COVID, did anyone on this site go to a store, go to a supermarket and not find your chicken, your milk, your thing? It got there during that most stringent lockdown the world has ever seen. And in South Africa, the trucking industry continued to work. And it has got massive challenges coming with the country's reliance on this sector. And this is where operators and the whole industry need to really aim for best practice. We are the wheels of the economy. And without it, this economy, we know where it's going.
Thank you, Patrick. Dave Steele, I have to just mention you in passing as well. Dave Steele is the head of RTR, his division locally in KZN. And Dave, if you want to turn your camera on, if you have, I put you at the forefront because I know you have that same passion that we have. And Dave is also one of those people that is very amenable, very professional, but always willing to help as well, but a very strict enforcer of the law. So if you are an insurer or a transporter or somebody that wants to know something about the law, speak to Dave. He's very clued up, and he is one of the heads at the RTR. So thank you, Dave, for attending, and thank you for your commitment as well.
Not a problem, Craig. Sorry, this laptop is a government laptop. I don't have a camera on it. But yeah, next time I'll come on my phone and you can see who I am. But thank you for that, Craig. Just to update you, I heard Patrick talk about electric vehicles. Actually on another meeting at this time through to Cape Town, virtually, and I've just been nominated to be on the main electric vehicle team to put in protocols for electric vehicles. And also we're going to Volvo, who has just brought in the electric truck into the country, truck tractor. So yeah, we see what goes forward for there. It's just that there's a serious problem with if those things catch fire, the lithium batteries.
It's good to hear that progress is being made, you know, in another realm that we're not aware of, that something is happening. That's a good thing. So give us some feedback sometime, Dave. Thank you all, guys.
Dave, you won't be busy. There's no electricity, but
guys, I have to.
Dave, you don't want to put your camera on so I can see how old you are these days. That's why you don't want a camera.
Yeah, no, my camera's not working on this one, but I'm now getting old, but I will be finishing off the end of October.
Yo, long time no see, Dave. Long time no see.
All right, I have to step out, gents. I'll leave you to chat. I have to step out. But please, guys, one last thing from me. Please, guys, as I said, the younger generation coming up is what we need to help. Please, everybody, put the effort in to help the younger generation up. Really put the effort in. Don't say we're going to do it and don't. Let's actually find someone, mentor them and help them along. Thank you, gents. I'm out of here.
Hold on, Craig.